welcome to our 5th episode where we are going to be talking about all things career progression, and the role that it plays in our lives.
Okay, so I'll kick it off. So what was your career path like? What did you want to do as a child, and what did you study in school to prepare yourself for a career, and what did you end up getting into?
Yeah, okay, so in elementary school, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian, which is, I don't know how I came up with that, probably because I really like animals, so I was like, oh, like the dream job is to just work with animals all day. But that was more like idealistic. The subjects that I was good at in school were probably like more STEM focused subjects, so math, science, which made like doctor feasible, but I was like a more math, stats focused kid. So then going into college, my thinking was like, maybe I'll be an actuary or like something along those lines, which like, you know, deals in math, stats, that kind of thing. But I do feel like my career path really changed when I met the people and joined the clubs that I did, because that's what influenced me to go into like business school. And then now on the career path I'm at today, I did banking for 2 years, did private equity for 2 years after that, similarly because all my peers went into private equity. And then after that came to the realization that I wanted to live my life a little more, but stay in finance. So I work on the finance team at a consumer tech firm now. Okay, do you want to talk about your career path and progression, like what you thought you were going to be, what you were really good at in school, how that influenced where you are now?
Growing up, I knew that I enjoyed like creativity and art, so I actually wanted to become an artist. And I also thought about like, oh, I really love like learning about space, and so maybe I should become an astronomer. So that was also fun. And so and then
how long did that last?
I think this was like 3rd to 5th grade.
This was 2
like,
years.
Yeah,
that's a good amount of time. Okay. Yeah.
This was like when people ask you what do you want to be when you grow up, and like that was my answer.
Okay.
Yeah. But then I think kind of what you were saying, like you get these influences from your peers and your parents, and they're like, you should do something practical. And then so when I went to school, I didn't know what I wanted to major in, so I went into business as well. And even then, when I was going through all the classes, I was like, well, accounting seems like this would be a stable job. So that's when I started taking more accounting classes, and I did an internship at Big Four. And I was like, well, this is it. I have found the role that I am going to do for the rest of my life. And
oh, you really thought that?
Yeah, because I literally had no idea what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I also knew it wasn't like aligned with my strengths. Okay. But I didn't know what kind of role where I could leverage my creativity in like a sustainable, like financially fit way. So that's why I chose to do accounting, and then did a full-time job there for 1 or 2 years. I absolutely hated it. Then I switched to I tried to get out of accounting by going into banking and doing more of a finance like role. Yeah. And that's where I got more into communication and like program management, and I switched over to tech from there. Yeah. But I've always really loved writing, and so I think my strengths are always kind of more on the creative, like liberal arts space.
Okay. So you're a program manager now. When you switched into tech, were you that as well, or did you switch once again when you got into tech?
I switched into program management in my second role in the bank. Okay. Yeah. So that was kind of like the stepping stone that eventually got me into tech later. Okay. A side question, what kind of skills did you find were like helpful going into like a banking role?
Oh, yeah, good question. I think what would have honestly been most helpful is like a crash course in being highly organized at the workplace, and then a crash course in influencing how people perceive you at the workplace. Okay. I feel like those are things that should be taught in college, but are frankly not.
So more of like the corporate game type skills.
I think that's like the more soft side, but then the crash course on like being highly organized and appearing highly organized is like, or like appearing very proactive is something that would have been helpful to know.
Yeah. And I feel like those skills are like throughout in job life, like not just in banking. Like I also discovered that too when I was joining the workforce too. And even like in tech, any career, I feel like those skills are super important.
Yeah, because you can't take a class, or like there's no existing class right now that, to my knowledge, teaches it in college.
Yeah.
But those are like, I think, the attributes that are going to get you the furthest. I think it's really funny how your personality like reflects in how you chose your accounting job. You were like, I need something stable and then I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life. And then my personality probably reflects as well in the first job that I chose, which is like, I need the best thing possible and I'm willing to switch after 2 years and I don't even know what I'm gonna switch to. Yeah.
I didn't have that mindset, like, because I think just career was such a brand new thing for me and I didn't know how to navigate that. But to your point, though, I feel like the first job out of college definitely taught me that it's not really so much about the specific skills that you learn in school. It's more of like you learn the skills of being a good employee. That's what my biggest takeaway from working in accounting was. Like, they taught me like how to be proactive and how to make sure you're communicating regularly, how to manage up. Like, these are things that like we don't take classes in, for sure. I'm curious, like, what kind of personal experiences that you had that made you realize like those skills were actually really important.
I feel like it didn't become obvious until my second job, because it was like a pretty dramatic switch from like where I was more remote during my first job to like pretty much fully like in the office for my second job, which is also like basically the time when people began to start in office. And it made me realize like the people who could get further ahead were the people who are more familiar with like the soft skills. And I feel like I don't have the benefit of parents who worked in corporate who could tell me what to do. And I fell behind by 2 years because I was more remote for the first 2 years of my job.
So in iBanking, like basically those, like when you were at Goldman, that was like basically all at home.
I worked mostly from home, and that was like more surviving than like knowing how to play the game or anything, because it was just so many hours.
Wow, so interesting.
And I think also probably in hindsight, the drawback of the structure of the program, which is like it's 2 years for the most part, is that made it pretty difficult to feel like I was fully in the game to stay there for the long term.
Because with private equity, it's like you're guaranteed 2 years, and then it's like, you know, that it's kind of a selection process after that, right?
For both banking and private equity, most of the time it's 2 years. Sometimes people do a little bit longer. Because I'm thinking of it in comparison with how the tech industry is. I feel like with tech industry, it's definitely less hierarchical. Like, there are levels, but I don't think it's this similar in the sense of like you're an associate for 2 years, then you're like a vice president for X years. I think it's a little more fluid and also a lot more dependent on performance. Versus tenure. So I think that's the biggest difference. And I think with tech, at least for the larger firms that I've worked at, there's 2 tracks. Like, there's the individual contributor track, and then there's the manager track, and you can choose which one you want to be in, but that also makes it so you don't feel pressured to become a manager if you don't want to be a manager. One other thing that I noticed when I switched to tech is that like the roles that people can take on, like the role that people have is like sometimes very specific. Like, so we'll have someone who is solely in charge of like negotiating with all our vendors, or we'll have someone who is solely in charge of like I don't know, like financial systems. So like I feel like that was not something that I had exposure to at my prior firm. I guess the thing that both industries have in common is like you have to deliver value of some sort. Like, the higher you get, the more responsible you are for like delivering the measure of value. So like at a bank, that's the amount of deals that you close. At a private equity firm, that's the amount of returns that you generate. In tech, it's more ambiguous. I think depends on the team and the company that you work for. But you are also responsible for delivering some kind of value.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not always the case at the more junior levels, basically. You're more evaluated on like work ethic and like your attitude. So I think we've both done career switches. Can you tell me about what was going through your head when you were doing your career switch? Are you happy you did it? What were your learnings?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, with my first year out of college, I went into accounting, and I knew like pretty soon after that wasn't the path for me, because I think the type of role it was just like looking at numbers all day, looking at spreadsheets all day, and knowing what my strengths are, I didn't think that was really aligned with them, and I didn't feel energized and motivated at work. And I think the other side of it was kind of what we were just saying, like the hierarchical aspect, like the way that like you're treated when you're like entry level or your junior level is just like so different. And you're not really evaluated for the value I guess there is the value aspect, but it's a lot more like the grunt aspect, less problem solving. So I knew that I wanted to switch out, and I think at that time this was like pre-COVID, when like tech was like really big in the Bay Area, and I had friends that were in tech, and I would like see like the type of work they worked on, and just like the lifestyle they had, the culture of their companies, and I felt like that resonated with me more in terms of like being able to have more agency and creativity to like have more impact in my work. So then that kind of motivated me to take on more tech clients at the Big Four company. And that did help like to add to my resume. And then when I switched to the second role in banking, I started pivoting the type of work I was doing, which was less accounting and more transferable to a tech company, which were more like management or program management type roles. And then that was a stepping stone that then allowed me to be the most prepared as I could to go into tech. So about 4 years out of college, I then made that switch. And I would say my learnings in that process, it really helps me understand what I enjoyed, which in terms of the type of work that I enjoy doing, it's being able to problem solve and solve ambiguous problems, and be able to have more agency and ability to create change in the team I'm working on, despite the level that I am, which I felt was more limiting when I was in Big Four. And so I would say those were the biggest learnings. And in terms of things that now I really value in career is like one, that autonomy and creativity aspect, but also having team members that are very collaborative despite the level that they are. So it's really nice to be able to work with like manager levels, directors, and they treat you as like a contributing member versus like, oh, you're an associate or you're an analyst, so you should do XYZ things. So those were some of the learnings that I got with that career transition, and I'm very happy today that I made the switch.
I relate to a lot of that. I feel like the attitude is totally different in the client services industry versus in tech. Honestly, like a lot of the more senior people in client services, they wouldn't like even open the working document. They would like not type things themselves. They would dictate to you. I think it's very different, like the attitude that people have within tech. Obviously, like senior people still like are less hands-on, but I think there's not that like mental block of like, I'm absolutely not going to do it because I'm senior that I saw at other companies. I don't like that. It's like, who do they think they are? Like, just because they have this title, like I think it's just like a difference in mentality. But I guess like relating to what you said, this is the main difference that I feel between the industries is like everything that I worked on in my prior two jobs didn't feel real, if that makes like it didn't feel like I was actually addressing or solving anything real, and the decision loops and the feedback loops are notoriously slow in both banking and private equity, and I think that also didn't vibe well with my personality. I think I like seeing the results of my actions in faster, essentially, and so one reason that I like working in my current role is I feel like I see the results of the work that I do for, like, at the end of the project. Like, things actually get implemented, or my advice is taken. Whereas, like, at my prior 2 roles, I felt like you could work on things for a really long time and nothing would come of it.
So they seem to value your work more?
I feel like it has a direct impact.
Yeah.
As opposed to before, even if the work was done, a lot of times it would not. Like, there wasn't like a decision that needed to be made. Sometimes work was done for the sake of work.
Yeah, which is very inefficient.
And yeah. I mean, like, I think some people, if it depends on your personality, right? Like, it's totally okay if you feel like that's okay for you and you feel fulfilled doing that type of thing, depending on who you are, but I definitely did not.
Yeah. I think to add to this, another thing is, I think working in tech, what motivated me to make the switch too is being able to have an impact on people. Where you're working on products that users use, like real people use, versus when you're in finance and accounting, it's like a lot of internal work. And so I think when you're able to contribute to something that actually impacts people, at least for me, that was very fulfilling. And I think that's why I find more enjoyment in the work now. Is the type of interview skills and questions similar, or did you have to prepare drastically different?
I felt like I would be most well suited to be like in a finance or even like biz ops role. So in that sense, like the type of work and the interview questions were similar. I just had to take time to prepare for each company that I was in.
I see. More expertise on the company itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like I did have confidence that I could do well in like the case part of it, which was mostly what happened.
Nice.
How about for you?
I would say it did take a lot of preparation. It was drastically different. I had no idea what my role could potentially be because it was so vastly different, even though I had the job description. So I researched like what are some common tech questions and potential tech responses. And I prepared all of that. Like I prepared like, okay, understanding the metrics, like kind of more from like a product oriented view, what are the metrics we should look at, what are the problems we're trying to solve, and like try to think and structure my questions and answers that way. It turned out that the role I was interviewing for was not a product specific role, so I wasn't actually preparing the most accurate way. But my answers, because they had the structure of a product answer, I think that's what got me through. Which was great. I think the structure helped. And I think learning how to speak in the language of tech really helped. Like speaking in the language of metrics, of users. Like these types of things I never thought about in accounting. Like why would we think about metrics and users, right?
How long was it from beginning to end? Like you were like, maybe I want to switch into tech, to like, oh yay, I got the job. Like how long did that take? It
started when I was at the Big Four company, when I made that switch to work on tech clients. So I worked on a tech client in South Bay, and then that kind of was like a way to get it on my resume a little bit. And then in my second job was kind of like trying to get out of accounting. So I would say in total, from start to when I wanted it to when I actually got it, was maybe 3 years as well. But it did take time to eventually build my resume to get to that point. So when you eventually made the change, like what was your like first year experience like? Did you experience imposter syndrome, or like were you like doing really well right off the bat? Like curious.
I think I just really enjoyed it because I think, like we talked about, the culture is very different. I also felt like I had the skill set that I needed to do really well in the job. Because it was just like basically like a faster decision loop of the same things that I was doing before. So it was like even it was like less detail oriented than what I was doing before.
That's good. Yeah. I experienced the opposite. I actually had a lot of imposter syndrome when I made the switch, because it was such a drastic change for me. But in terms of overcoming that, I think like kind of what we were talking about, like just leveraging the skills we learned in our first year, which on how to be a good employee, like being as proactive as possible, building proposals in advance versus expecting others to build a proposal for you. I think that's always valuable, because then people know that you've thought about it, and then they can add on or iterate based off that. That has helped me, and just like being like faking it until you make it. I think that's helped me. Like I faked it till I made it, and I think that helped me just like overcome that imposter syndrome faster until I was able to have like the small wins and accomplishments at work. Yeah.
I think opposite to you, I had felt a lot of imposter syndrome at my prior roles.
At PE?
And in banking.
Well, how did you navigate it?
I don't think I ever navigated it that well. I was just like trying my best around it, but it just always felt like I couldn't really relate to any of the things that were being said, probably because nothing that I worked on felt real, like I talked about before. Yeah.
Could you tell me about your experience working at private equity and what caused you to want to leave that in the end?
I think there are some like more obvious things like work-life balance, not for me. I also didn't really feel like I was interested long-term in the type of work that was being done, as well as like the really slow feedback loop. I think for context, like sometimes decisions take like a year.
That's crazy.
A year to get made, and I think I just personally I'm an impatient person and I don't have the patience for it.
Yeah.
I also had some ethical concerns about the industry, which is like it didn't feel like anything that was being done in private equity was good for society. I think some of the headlines recently have made it pretty obvious, like the things that private equity has done to healthcare systems that they've taken over, as well as the things that private equity has like caused or surfaced issues, and like a lot of the companies have gone bankrupt that they've taken over. Being someone who has worked in the industry, I acknowledge that it's not always the PE firm's fault, but even when I was working within the industry, it never felt like we were improving things, if that made sense. Like it always felt like it was either neutral or negative, and I feel like for me in my job I wanted to be at least neutral, like the impact to society, which is, I don't know if that's a high bar to have, but I feel like that's a bar that I have for the work that I do.
Yeah, I feel like from my low knowledge about PE, it almost seems like PE is kind of like extreme capitalism. Like it's like a company kind of taking over another company to increase its profits. It's kind of like, are they actually taking over another company to improve it, or is it to improve their own profits? And in my opinion, I feel like since they are a business will always try to increase their own profits. So maybe they're not always thinking about the ethical aspects, especially like in the healthcare industry, where a lot of like these industries like healthcare or like accounting, for example, like they're supposed to be ethical. It's supposed to be to benefit like the user, the consumer, right? So
I think it depends on your view on it, but yeah, obviously private equity is in the business of making money for its shareholders. And actually a lot of US business, pretty much all of the US businesses are, but they do it in different ways, and some of them are like more palatable to me than others. Yeah.
What are like the top 3 things that you care about with work, and what do you prioritize at work?
Top 3? Salary, work-life balance, generally reasonable people to work with. What are the top 3 things that you care the most about?
Yeah, so I think definitely salary is 1, of course. 2 would be how impactful my work is. Kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about impact on people. I think I would want to try to optimize for working on something that actually means something, either for the business or for like users. And then lastly, I think I really care about management, like how well leadership is, and also more directly like my manager. I care about having a good manager to support me.
Okay, can you be more specific? What makes a manager good in your view versus bad?
Yeah, so I think for me, the 2 things that I really prioritize when I'm looking for a good manager is 1, someone who is a really good advocate for their team. So of course, this is also dependent on like how like good the individual contributor is. But assuming like strong individual contributors, I would hope that the manager is good at increasing visibility of the work that their team does, and also supporting when it comes to performance reviews, like making sure that the good work that's been done is known. Because I feel like that's really powerful and important in the career progression. And I think the second piece about management is the ability to give autonomy to a team. So allowing team members to perform on their own and trust that they're able to act and have a good work ethic on their own, and allowing them to problem solve without being too micromanaging. I would say those are the top two for managers. Quick pause, editing Bianca here. At this point, our storage got full, so we switched over to my iPhone. So apologize for the bad audio quality going forward for this video. Okay, so now that you've made the career transition, what are some tips that you have for playing the corporate game and working towards a promotion in your career?
Always make sure that your work is visible. Try to work on the highest priority, most important projects. And usually you will probably get promoted the fastest if you're well liked, in my opinion. What do you think? Yeah,
I would say +1 to all of those. I think especially in my early career, what I didn't realize as much was the point about working on the highest impact projects. Like, I think as more junior employees, we always think like, oh, if we're working the hardest, longest hours, then that's probably the best way to show that we're good workers. But then I realized that actually what's important is like thinking in the mindset of leaders. And I think leaders care about what's important for the business. So caring about what leaders are thinking and prioritizing and getting behind those specific initiatives will be the most effective use of your time as like an employee, and not focusing on like getting as many projects done as possible. Yeah.
And that's not always obvious right away. I feel like every place has different priorities, and it definitely takes a few months to pick up on the dynamics of what is most important.
Yeah. And how about tips for like likability and getting that visibility?
I feel like likability, that's a hard one. It's hard to be likable when you're not yourself, so I feel like it's generally better to try to be more true to yourself. Being more genuine, if you can be, then like more genuine, I think is the key to it. And I do feel like the workplace rewards extroverts. I don't know if you agree, but I think it is like just trying to be social if you can.
Yeah, like that aspect of networking, which I know as a fellow introvert, I don't love it, but I think being there when you need to, like networking when you need to, making sure you're talking to leaders so that they know who you are. Like picking the best poison. I would say from an introvert's POV, for me, is like picking the time and place that you think would be the best time to like get that visibility and make sure that your name is known, at least from a leadership perspective. So when it comes to like promotion timeframes, at least they would have heard your name and they're familiar with like what you work on, and that can only benefit you when it comes to promotion conversations between managers. I would say another aspect too is like related to networking and knowing and bringing visibility. The more people who know of your work across your organization is super helpful, because like when your manager advocates, then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know who Bianca is. I've worked with her on XYZ project, and other people can also advocate for you. So it's about getting as many advocates as you can in the room when you're going for that promotion.
That's interesting, because I feel like it depends on how the decision is made.
Yeah. So, and from your perspective, like when would that not be beneficial for you?
I think it's beneficial, but it depends on who the decision makers are. So it's like, I think it's always good to know how the decision is made and who is going to make the decision. So like if you need to know who will have the most influence in making the decision, to know who to network with.
Yeah. So talking to the decision maker.
Yeah, talking to the decision maker and figuring out who that is.
Yeah. And I would say this type of stuff, like you don't learn like in school. It's like from your experience being an employee for many years that you kind of realize that it's a game that you have to play. And especially as an introvert, it's not natural to do this, but it's important to think about it so that you're making the best use of your time as an employee and you're doing what you can to advance your career rather than stay stagnant.
Yeah. And if you think you're not playing a game, it means the game is playing you. Like, yeah. That is unfortunately how it works. Yeah.
Like the fact that we need to play this game in order to appease others or be liked is kind of sucky in my opinion, but I think that's just how it is, like if we work for corporations.
Yeah, no way around it.
Yeah,
unless you're the boss, but then you are creating the game for others to play.
And
you're still playing the game, just with different players.
To be honest, like I would rather be the boss and make other people play the game than me being part of the Squid Games, so to speak.
But as the boss, you still have to play a game. You're just playing it with different people now.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to be like playing a game with someone. To wrap up our episode, what do you envision yourself doing in your 40s and 50s career-wise?
Yeah, so I think ultimately I've been wanting to be a lot more entrepreneurial in recent years. And I think part of that is like this drive to want to be creative and build my own thing. I think it'd be really great to start something on my own where I could be my own boss. And I think I've gotten a lot more perspective in recent years, especially like post layoffs, that I have a little more skepticism on like corporations and just working in the corporate world, because I realize that every company is a business, and so they're going to prioritize their needs to make money over like stability for employees. And so with that perception now, I think I would like to be more in control of my career, and not feel like I'm at the mercy of like bigger companies and whether they'll lay me off or not. And I realize that even if I can be the highest performer at a company, that's many times not enough. Like it's still going to be up to the company to prioritize the business and the costs of having employees. So I think ultimately when I'm like 40 or 50, ideally would love to have my own thing going, maybe in the creative space, and passive income, reach fire. Like I think that's my ultimate goal.
Nice.
And I would say one thing that I want to ask you too is like, if you were to turn back time and to your younger self, like maybe like in college, like what's advice that you would tell yourself entering the workforce?
I think personally I would just say take a very hard look at yourself and know what matters to you and try to align. It would be better if I could have aligned on that before I entered the workforce and being like realistic with myself.
Don't be too hard on yourself exiting college on like thinking that what you've chosen as your first job is the end all be all, because like I think we're living representation of that career is like a winding path and you are in control of each year of your career. So people
switch roles all the time. If you really need to, you can go get an MBA and then switch roles. So don't feel like you're stuck with the decisions. Those are sunk costs.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening to episode 5 of our podcast on career. Looking forward to the next one.